Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the JT Foxx Podcast Network. On this show, we interview some of the biggest celebrity: Pacino, Stallone, Schwarzeneggers, billionaires, very successful entrepreneurs. We dive on topics, we debate the news. But today we have a very special guest because whether you like Bitcoin or you hate Bitcoin, or you think it's going to go up to the moon, or you think it's going to crash, it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to want to go away. And so you're going to have to accept that there will always be a place in the world for cryptocurrency. Where, how, when, how. I've got one of the top experts in the world on it. Not only, has he invested in Bitcoin, but he makes it, and he's been making it for a very long time. And this industry is full of scammers and people that, I can't tell you how many people have used my name to raise money crypto from other people. I should hire them to work for me because literally millions of people on social media impersonation. And I happened to meet this individual through Mikey, who's a friend of mine. And we basically went to see an operation in Texas. And, this is not your laptop, or your little hard drive kind of working in the back. This is probably a full-blown factory, probably one of the most impressive display of ingenuity, of future, of tech all at once and crypto mining facility. So here we have Marshall Long. He is the best. He is known to them. Everyone knows who he is. And if you don't know, he's a quite funny guy sometimes. So, and because of him, I got to wear this whole yellow outfit for safety purposes. So it made a good Instagram picture. Marshall, welcome. How are you?
Thanks, JT. Much love, brother. I'm doing well.
So Marshall, you obviously you've been in crypto since when? What was the price that you got in? You and I met a mutual friend of mine. He got in at 289, and that takes some big cojones to get in at 289 when it was just almost like a joke at that point. What was the number you got on?
I was kicking around Bitcoin, nickel dime Bitcoin, somewhere around there.
So what was it about? Because a lot of people either too late, people got in at 68, right? And they're like, this scam, right? Now it's at 30, right? And so 28, 29, 30. What was it that you said, this is going to be a game changer? Did you look at it as a hobby? Did you see it as the future? What was it that you had visualized? What was your background before that?
Sure. So I used to be a structural design engineer. So I designed paint spray booths at an engineering firm. And I did websites and development on the side. And a friend of mine just over lunch was like, dude, you got to check out this nerd money. It's awesome. And so I kind of went down the rabbit hole, didn't have an economics background, didn't have any semblance of how money worked or how the world worked in general. It was purely a hobby and, out of a nerdy desire to kind of learn what this internet nerd money was about. And that was it.
But obviously, if someone says to you, wow, this is how it works. It just seemed, looking back, you buy a bit of pizza with that, at the first 10,000, which is store, which I think I saw the other day, that'd be worth $269 million today. And then there was a phase where eventually was used for, was it Silk Road? So the legal competent. So when did you realize, and what was the moment you're like, wow, this is something that's going to be the future? Because at this point, it's, you never know if it's going to hit.
So 2010, it was just I'm interested. I have a gaming computer. I just want to see what it's about. And honestly, I didn't really comprehend the scope of everything until around 2013 when new ASIC hardware started coming out, and I started doing more business with people in China and realizing it's really hard for them to send money anywhere. I didn't have any idea that's how the world worked at large. That, I'm a very privileged white kid from Texas who, from global standards, grew up very well. And I just thought money is just how I pay my bills. And, if I need to send a wire somewhere, I can do that. But the reality is most people don't have that freedom. And it wasn't until I started, doing a lot of work on mining machines in China that I was like, man, why is it so hard to send money outside the country? Then I learned about capital controls and how most countries are a lot less free than I grew up. And that's when things started turning. And I was like, oh, okay. I just thought this was just a commodities business where, I take Bitcoin and I sell it for cash and I live my life. But the breadth and the depth and breadth of the scope is a lot bigger than that.
When did you start saying, I'm going to start making it, right? Are the stories true? You set up a laptop and you sort of plug it in and then it was making some money. That's how it started. And how did you come about to say, like, I'm going to start making it?
Yeah, so I started just with a laptop that I had at the time and gaming computers that I had at the time. It was just CPUs running, and it wasn't making anything. And then it was just like, oh, these are like numbers appearing on a screen, and I can like send these numbers to other people. Okay, cool. And then the price, went from like it went from nothing to, 10, 20, $30. And then when I really started noticing, oh, this might have legs, was one day Bitcoin went from $20 to $120 and then back to $30 on one exchange. And I was like, whoa. And I can remember very clearly thinking, I wish I knew more rich people that I can convince to like do this with me. And that was probably like 2011, 2012, around that time where, Bitcoin started peaking its head above $100. And that's when I really started to feel, not from like any other motive outside of like making money, making dollars. That's when I was like, I need to buy more graphics cards. I need to get on Craigslist. I need to like arbitrage Craigslist to mine more Bitcoin. And then I maxed out the energy in my apartment, so much so that, my girlfriend at the time couldn't plug in a hairdryer without tripping all the breakers. And then from there, just scaling up into a more serious operation. So
Yeah, which we'll talk about it too. What about the swings, right? I'm sure you're used to it, like by now. Like you've had thousands of swings, but you have a lot of people that say, okay, I bought it at 30, let's say, right? And then all of a sudden, oops, back to 27, right? Or right, and then it's been crazy because we're emotional beings, right? The market is not rational, it's irrational. And there's no logic why things go up or down. In many cases, they just go down because, of bad news. Today Bitcoin is up because once again, another bank may go under when they just said the day before the banking system was there. So now all this confidence. Now, it used to be Bitcoin was a hedge against inflation, but for a long time, it was really tied to the stock market, especially during the pandemic. Stock market goes down, Bitcoin went down, right? Because a lot of those people are in techs. So it wasn't like, only now is there starting to be a little bit of a, hey, maybe this could be a hedge, maybe now evolving. So like, how do you deal, or did you deal with it? And were you like watching it? Did it worry you? I'm like, I just, one day I'm worth 10 million, the next day I'm more like 1 million. And that bother you?
So from I learned a lot of hard lessons on volatility swings in 2013. Because the state of the mining machines at that time was there was a new one coming out sometimes it was every month, something twice as good would come out. And so, you really had to like chase this arms race of Bitcoin mining. And that was when Bitcoin hit $1,000 for the first time. And at that point, it didn't matter. Like, it's call your mom, call your dad. We're plugging everything in. We're sleeping on the data center floor. We're going to just go as hard as we can. And then the bottom fell out and it went to $180 in 2014. And then you realize I've made some very poor choices. So I learned a lot of what not to do in the mining game early. And I'm very fortunate for that. So when it happens again and again and again, you're more prepared. So as far as my side of the business, when it comes to mining, it is whoever can produce the commodity for the cheapest wins always. However, as a long-term Bitcoin holder, I really like this time around because Bitcoin was created in a time where banks were failing. Now it's come again a decade or so later. And when, SVB went out and Signature went out, Bitcoin rallied. This is exactly what Bitcoin was made for. And you're seeing for the first time in a decade or more, first time since it was created, the market is now more adopted Bitcoin. More people know about Bitcoin, and people are going to Bitcoin as a haven against, truthfully, fractional reserve banking. So,
but Marshall, people are still scared. People are still scared because it's not like a commodity. Like people like, oh, you can buy stuff at the store. Let's say store accept Bitcoin. No one is gonna basically pay $100, like $1,000 for something because that 1,000 can be worth 8,000 one day. But on the other hand, you have the merchant who, let's say I buy Bitcoin and, my margins are 20%. And then all of a sudden something happened overnight and I'm living paycheck to paycheck or bill to bill. All of a sudden my Bitcoin is worth $900 and I can't afford to wait it out, and in order for it to be completely stable, would it mean that there's not big swings, which is part of Bitcoin? What makes it exciting is the big swings up and down to make money, whether they're traders or buying opportunities. So at what point does mass adoption, or is it never going to be a mass adoption that every store will accept Bitcoin because, there's a risk on their books?
So I think the answer to the question is time will tell. What I usually tell most people is Bitcoin is very good chaos insurance. And the worst case scenario, if you diversify slightly into Bitcoin out of normal traditional assets, if Bitcoin does its job even a little bit, that 5% of your portfolio or holdings or whatever you want to call it in times of great peril will pay for itself. That being said, in times of great fear, everybody sells off to cash. Everybody, real estate, gold, all the hard assets sell off to cash, but the hard assets are also the first to recover. So when the pandemic crash happened, everything took about 6 months to come back. Bitcoin took 35 days to come back. So the reality is, in times of great fear, globally, people flock to cash, but hard assets recover quickly, and Bitcoin is a hard money asset. So if you're not a risk taker at all, you can't afford to have zero exposure to Bitcoin unless you think the world is perfect as it is. If you think there is zero risk in your life, don't get Bitcoin. If you think everything's hunky-dory and you think everybody's acting in your best interest, Bitcoin's not for you. If you have a tinge that everything is not hunky-dory all the time, Bitcoin's for you. And I feel like that basically encompasses everybody globally. I don't think there's a single person who can sit there and say, everything's great, everything's perfect. I don't think that person exists, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think for the gross majority of people who are well off, Bitcoin is chaos insurance. If you're not well off, Bitcoin is life support.
What about the notion? Because people saw what happened to NFTs, right? Everybody was rich and everybody's making money. And you saw that a lot with some of the shit coins. And when Elon Musk plays with everybody with the Dogecoin and it goes, oh, we're going to adopt it. It goes up and it goes down. And then the Shiba. I mean, there's so many coins off the top of my head that were going to be. I mean, I've done a lot of crypto, and Zcash I still have, and that's been very good for me. But that's because someone knew the hell was talking about. Say, just do that, right? And so are what we call the shit coins, the meme coins that are just in a way a joke, right? And I remember 5 years ago, 6 years ago was the IPOs, right? So, the white papers and the sort of the coin, like the special ICOs, right? The projects, ICOs, they all went to shit, right? And NFTs in a way all went to shit. ETH and Bitcoin has stayed. Yeah, there are other coins, and who knows what's going to happen with Ripple in the lawsuit. And I think the SEC, I think that whether or not it's a security, and I think if the SEC came out as it's either illegal or a security or or something else, I think there'd be more clarity, but there's still no clarity in the United States. You have companies like Germany, something like, hey, they put the Bitcoin logo. So I think Europeans have been more open to mass adoption and South American countries. But how does one navigate the difference between these little coins, which seem affordable, but you can also buy Bitcoin fractionally. You don't need to buy one.
Yeah. So like how do you overcome the unit bias, right? That's what it, people say, oh, one Bitcoin is 30,000, right? And one, whatever doggy coin is like 1 cent. Why wouldn't I just buy that? That's just unit bias, because most people don't understand that, like you said, you can just buy a fraction, right? You're not buying whole ounces of gold, right? But do you say, oh, I would buy 1 ounce if somebody gave you 1 ounce of silver. Yeah, like nobody's saying that silver is better than gold outside of like a fringe community. But the reality is the unit bias does play strong to a lot of people's psyche. What separates a good project from a bad project? Here's what I usually say. There are projects with merit. I think Ethereum has merit. I think there's some of these privacy coins that have merit. For me personally, I think Bitcoin is the only hard money asset. Bitcoin is the only thing I want to spend my time on, but there are other projects that have value. My only contention is when those projects claim to be better money or a harder asset than Bitcoin, that's when I have issue. However, there are other projects that have great value for a plethora of reasons. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say there's maybe like 10 projects that are decent. The rest of
Right.
them are trash.
So I see a lot of things on Twitter, right? Everybody's a Bitcoin, a crypto millionaire, and the cars. And my experiences, there's, and by the way, I know what you have. I've heard from Mikey. I've seen what you have. A very low key pickup truck, just very low key. And if anything, as one of the big dogs in the industry, you would have every right to showcase and stuff like that, which is the real crypto people don't do that unless they're selling some kind of course on crypto, sure. Right? In your experience, you've seen the people, the flash, the people, because you will know very quickly when you talk to someone what they have, what they don't have, what they know, right? It's like me in business. I'll quickly figure you out once I ask some questions. See, but there's a facade to the outside world. Are the most people boasting on there? I mean, every OnlyFans a crypto expert, right? And then they're like, you know what I mean? They buy one Bitcoin and now all of a sudden they're experts. Like you see out there, is most of it fake and it's just a social media world where I'm trying to fake it till you make it? Or would you say the majority, are like all very successful?
I will say it's two things. There are younger people than me who have done very well for themselves for one reason or another. I've noticed that it's not really about how much I know as how much life experience I have, right? If this was me maybe 10 years ago, I'd probably be buying a car, buying a real flashy boat, whatever, But now in my, mid 30s, what I value is not that, what I value is like spending time with friends. And, when you guys came out to the site, that was awesome. Like I would take that over a day in a Ferrari anytime.
It was a good burger.
It was. So
I left excited about it. We'll talk about that, but I left excited after meeting you. I left excited. I didn't had nothing to do with the fact that, and I had done crypto mining myself. Right. I left excited because the way you explain your vision, and I'll talk about your thought process, but the way you explain your vision and the problems you were solving that nobody really was solving, from tasting the liquid, that was something that's still in my mind. Like there should be like an infomercial. But that was like the entrepreneurial journey, which I don't know if people understand. Bitcoin mining is a business, an entrepreneur business, which I think a lot of people have ruined by saying it's a scam and cloud mining and all this. We talk about that. So for you, you're just down to earth, which leads me to my next question with you, your thought process. So you come from an engineering background and this wires in the back and where it goes, like it's a very exciting thing. I'm more of a right brainer and more of a left brainer. And you think that, like, how do you go about to say, I want to learn more about either this or subject? I'm pretty much, and maybe you could relate it to your thought process of AI. I imagine with what's happening AI, there will be a big use in cryptocurrency, in sort of mining productivity and operational, so your process of like, how do I learn something to make better? Because you've done innovative changes nobody else has done. And I think a lot of people just kind of wait for it to happen and you trying to figure things out. So maybe take us your thought process. How do you think, what is your process to learn and better yourself?
So for a long time, it was just like learn about the foundational technology. But now as I've been in it long enough, I think the engineering side of me, engineering just kind of like in my DNA where I'm like, we could do something better. What does that look like? And how does that affect our bottom line? So I really enjoy pairing engineering with business where the nice thing about mining is any iterative design change that gives you incremental efficiency gain is directly impactful to your bottom line. And so any engineering increments we can do, like, okay, because in our immersion mine, I think, okay, is this fluid better? Can it cool it better? Maybe the machines can run 0.5% better. Well, guess what? You just made 0.5% more revenue by solving an engineering problem. And that's kind of like the beauty of mining for me is it combines all the engineering stuff that I love doing with the entrepreneurial stuff that I've only been doing for the past, 10 years or so.
So it's almost like Elon Musk, the idea of like, okay, you can't do this with rockets. All right, I'm going to figure it out. Or you can't do this with card, right? Is that the same process of that? And by the way, not everyone is like that or to have a love to do that. I'm very good at business. I've learned about a business and I figure out I couldn't do what you do because the attention to detail of technology, like I don't have an engineering background. And if I immerse myself and learn, I probably do, but you get to a point of success. You're like, what's the point? But you like really like, will you search, call people, Google, fly to places to see?
I would say a good example of that is, foundationally, mining hasn't really changed. Bitcoin hasn't really changed. There's been upgrades, improvements, whatever. But what I didn't know a lot about, except for like the past maybe 3 or 4 years, was trading power markets. And as you get better trading power markets, you can run a more efficient business. And so that has been a really good example of where you can't just Google how does power work in Texas. It is so nuanced. And most people that you talk to don't know everything. So you've got to piece together this puzzle over lunches and conferences and meeting with people. And I like talking with people, casually. I like meeting new people and I like learning from people and then kind of piecing together those puzzles to make a better business decision on how to leverage power contracts, resulted in really favorable business terms.
So what he's talking about is, because power is unregulated in Texas, where the mining is, what happens is the price will fluctuate up and down. And when there's an adverse weather event, they basically kind of can broker it. And once in a while, they can shut the machine off and sell the power back to whoever needs it, which is also very smart, not only for the financial, even if it was a break even, because the big problem all over the world is how much power these things take, and to be like, hey, we saved you and we helped you, rather than, well, look at these greedy people are taking all power. And people, like, from a PR standpoint, it's brilliant, but there's also a big financial. I remember the story you said to that, so I'm not gonna divulge, but that was very impressive. You said that, but understanding that you're looking for other best uses of monetization past just the machine making money. And so in a way, you're in the power business also more so than the mining business.
Yeah, I would say in a nutshell, a very good Bitcoin miner is more a power arbiter than a technology company. If you do mining well, you should be arbitraging power markets for both the benefit of the community as well as the benefit of your business. And those aligned incentives are very uniquely suited for Bitcoiners.
So I got in at 3,200, and it was kind of by accident. I'll never forget that, because I had a choice to go to the McGregor-Mayweather fight or go take a look at a Bitcoin operation in Washington State. And I think you and I talked, I don't know if you remember the story. He was one of the first ones. And then after seeing it, the partner he had some machines there, and the guy got shut down because it was taking the power from the dam. And then all of a sudden, they said, like, we're not giving it to you. And he had built a substation right next to it to try to have the lead time. And they just kind of screwed them, and that screwed him over. And then the investor sued him, and it was a nightmare. So my German partner took the machine and stuck him in Scandinavia. And we also made a lot of money. If I remember, it was like 3 cents a kilowatt back then. And I remember saying, hey, we need a long-term contract on this. He goes, why? Look at this. If you get a Tesla for free, then you basically, you don't have to pay taxes, or you can take this line. At some point, when they realize how much electricity it takes, the environmentalists are going to wonder. And so we had a long-term contract, and sure enough, 5 years later, it wasn't 3 cents anymore.
Yeah.
It's like 1921, which made it, and 25 in places like Portugal. So it made it like pretty much unprofitable. And there was nothing you could do because the environmental. Similar thing happened in Iceland. That was the hot spot for a while in Europe. And ironically enough, America was like the spawn of all this. And next thing you know, Texas became the thing. So, and I remember for me to set up a whole operation was $5 million, right? Which is a lot of money back then. Now you're talking about $300-400 million of facility. How has the mining facility of you building, and maybe talk about in terms about what you built, which looked like a giant factory, like it'd be like Elon Musk setting a gigafactory.
Right.
With, like, this is nothing. Like, you think someone might look at this as impressive. Like, this is nothing compared to what I've seen. It was I would call it a marvel of engineering, especially how you explain it. Tell us how it's now changed for you and from what it was.
Sure. So mining early days was, you were a really big dog if you had, in terms of power usage, if you had 2 to 5 megawatts, you were among the top of the top, talking 2012, 2013. And then, just after that, if you had 20 megawatts, you were crushing it. You were God status. Now things have just gotten out of hand. And to put that in perspective, most houses use, I would say 1 megawatt is probably the equivalent of, 300 to 1,000 homes. And so, if you were using power, to put that in perspective, of a modern day hyperscale Bitcoin miner, you're talking about the same power consumption as 30,000 or 300,000 homes, depending on where they're located. And so the scale has changed. The equipment design has changed, as well as the mining machines themselves have iteratively changed. So things are bigger, but things are also more efficient. So our compute density, all things equal, has gone up orders of magnitude. And I'll give you an example here. I just happen to have this on my disk. The original Bitcoin miners had just one chip on them. The original Bitcoin specific ASICs had one chip on them. This is a current generation miner. It's got hundreds of chips on it, and these chips are massively more efficient than the first generation. So we went from one little black square to a sea of black squares, and there are usually 3 or 4 of these in one machine. So the nature of the build outs have changed, as well as how we cool the build outs. So what you saw was an immersion Bitcoin mine, and that's something that's fairly new. That's only been kicking around the past 4 years at best.
The idea is
We
to
used to
cool.
just
The
blow hot
biggest
air.
problem is that you'd have like kind of fans blowing into
That's right.
cooling, and the overheating is a problem. And by the way, these machines are monitored 24 hours a day, 365, right? So you have to understand there are people on site all the time, because if the machine is down, then you're not making money. And so you have to quickly kind of replace it. And so what I saw, correct me if there, is that there was a system of some kind of liquid or water that would go into and literally like the row of machines that look like they were like in a box, but through it, there's some water or a solution that goes in there that was cooling them, making them not overheat. Was that a fair for the average person listening here?
Yeah, it's kind of like instead of putting fans on the machines, you're putting them in a bathtub of oil. You can just think of it as
edible,
mineral oil.
as Marshall demonstrated to
us. Tastes quite buttery, as JT found out. It's kind of like if there's a bathtub and it's not water, it's a non-conductive fluid. You put the machine in it, you pass the fluid through it, it picks up the heat, and then it shoves it outside to effectively a large car radiator, and then cycles it back in. So that's kind of what immersion cooling is. You dunk it in a bathtub, run the fluid over it, get rid of the heat with a car radiator effectively, and then shove it back into the bathtub. And it's just a loop that continuously cools.
Two quick questions. Keys to success. I have an idea why you're successful. I meet enough successful people. I mean, I met Michael Dell, last week. And so you have enough conversation with people, you kind of figure it out very quickly. What do you think why you're successful, if you break it down?
Why I personally think I'm successful, I would say it's I've learned to be quite good at edge case identification, because edge cases, especially in the Bitcoin industry, will easily, they're all existential threats to your business. The other thing is being very good at knowing when you need to hire people and what kind of people. The book, Good to Great, really put a spotlight on one of my issues previously. The old Eckerd CEO, there's a chapter about him in there that said they called him the genius with 1,000 helpers, because he tried to do everything, and you hamstring your own scalability if you do that. And so the concept of, if the company's a bus and you make sure the right people are on the bus and you start driving the bus, where they sit is much less important. And you can do that after the bus is already moving. It's just important that the bus is moving, the bus has gas in it, and the right people are on the bus. Empowering people to succeed, and if I put my time up front to teach somebody, it is a huge mental drain. But if I condense it at the beginning, then it allows that employee to really scale beyond what I'm even capable of. And that is empowering people to be better than you will really allow you to scale bigger and faster.
And you really have no ego. That's one thing I realized, like just whoever was on the job site, whether they were just a regular foreman person, hi to everybody. Like it just was, you sat with the people having lunch. It was not like I have my own office. I'm like, you were like sitting in the general area, which, and also people come to and say, hey, I have a question, solve that out, like very approachable, which by the way, I noticed these things. I want to talk about one more thing before, because I think it's important. People watch this interview, and next thing you know, you'll have fake accounts from me or Marshall selling you Bitcoin
That's right.
Right. I mean, I was like, right. I mean, it's happening a lot. So I need to talk about that because it's frustrating when, especially use my name or name. We don't sell big, like we're not Instagramming you to buy Bitcoin to send you to a WhatsApp number. Can you talk about how, well, but that's what they do. And you know what they're using now? Oh, I have to tell you this. Someone took my voice and used AI and basically in AI told them to buy Bitcoin. Like I'm kidding you. And so they would take this interview. And so that's where it's going. So what is when people say, oh, buy into crypto mining scam, can you explain to people, educate the people about what would be a scam so that people are aware?
Yeah. So the biggest hallmark of any crypto scam is send me something. The double-edged sword of Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, but that also means you can screw yourself over quite handedly. So I would say that the biggest thing is if somebody's asking you for something and you have to give them something first, that's a red flag, right? So anybody that is worth their salt and really believes in their product, and there's a decent amount of good products and projects out there that, you know, I've personally invested in a few of them around the Bitcoin scene. There should be provable evidence that something exists and that you should be able to touch and feel without sending anybody anything.
And talk to other people.
Yeah.
Also, too, if you haven't talked on the phone, just by text messages. And the best people are not randomly messaging you on TikTok and Instagram with financial opportunities.
No, never.
Last question, Marshall. So I'm going to put my hat on. And so my friend gave me this hat, the one you met. So it's a good hat. I like it.
It's a great hat.
So Marshall, you're a relationship guy. If you and I were to work together on something or get involved in business, right? And by the way, you can answer whatever you answer. You're not obligated to say good or bad or yes or no, however. And you know my capabilities, you know my network, and I know what you do. And as a, you know, I should have followed up. It's just something happened in a fact that I felt bad that it didn't happen. And as a result, you're sometimes responsible for the people, even though it's not your fault. You're always responsible for who you introduce. What would be a way that you think we could work together as well with all the what you're working on as well? You know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so now's an interesting time in Bitcoin mining in general, where you have commodities businesses that are, you know, mostly just like they have big profit margins and that's it. You don't need anything else. They're taking these companies public. But when you're public, there's a whole nother side of the ecosystem that I think is heavily underserved that you would be a great fit for. And that is the PR and, you know, all kinds of content to explain what is going on in the ecosystem. We have a very small, newly burgeoning industry in like the political lobbying scene. There's some PACs that have popped up. You're good at knowing people and you're good at explaining complex problems to people. I think that's where you would really shine, especially given the commercialization of Bitcoin in general. You know, these knuckleheads are, you know, we're just dudes who are usually out here putting shovels in the ground, and now we're on Wall Street. We have no business being there. We don't know what we're doing.
He's probably
right?
the first guy that's ever asked me for my money. Like everybody asks me for my money. He's the first guy, which is kind of interesting. I was expecting the money part, which I mean, whatever project it is, you know, it's about people. It's never, you know, you could have the greatest crypto mine facility or business and it's a real estate deal, but it's about the people as well. And, you know, you're definitely a smart dude. And even just doing this interview, and I'm sure you do a lot of interviews. Sometimes they're very technical, critical, but I think this is more an inspiration about taking risk. About building relationship, reinventing yourself in a way of something you're not, from a, you know, industrial designer to an entrepreneur, to basically a crypto guy, to an entrepreneur that's a crypto, to now on Wall Street, and agreeing to do this interview and say, listen, let me spread the word, which I think probably, hopefully this interview will serve as a beacon of understanding exactly what crypto mining is, what the opportunity, in a non-hype way. And I think what I like that you said the most for people listening is, hey, put 5%, put 3%, put 2%. He never said go all in, right? And I think that's the smart move where everybody's like go all in, because you know losing sucks, and you know if you're not hedged and diversified, and I think cryptocurrency has become a hedge, and that's what it's about. So Marshall, is there a site you want to give, or you just is there something you want to give, or anything you want to promote or something like that in the end?
No, not really. I mean, you can always follow my Twitter, just OGBTC. It's my Twitter handle, and that's it. I mean, I don't have anything to sell anybody.
No,
I'm
it
just
is,
here to
and
help.
it just and I'm glad. First of all, Mikey, you're going to be watching this. Thank you once again, and you have to always, acknowledge the people that did this, and
That's right.
and if you guys do a huge favor, and I think educating the people about what we did here, sharing that link, commenting, subscribing, or if you're on the podcast, share it, because I think this is not about Bitcoin. This is a business, right?
Yep,
And
that's right.
and it's a business, and the product happens to be cryptocurrency, no different than real estate, no different than anything. And it has risk than anything. And you've really cracked the code. And I will take you up on your offer. I'll fly down to Austin. I do have a couple of big friends now to actually go in there. So it kind of works out. This time it
Oh
works
yeah.
out there as well. I'll stop by to see Michael Dell and my buddy
Oh yeah.
JT. Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. And I think inspirational to everybody else in the future. And I think there's a lot of lessons of how very successful people in business don't flash. Remember telling Michael Dell, looking at like people that show either don't have, or they're trying to prove something, or they're trying to sell something. And if you're comfortable who you are, then you can just love the game of the process. And I think
That's right.
you meet a lot of very successful people, but more importantly, a man who took a lot of risk, and to get to where you are now, where everyone told you it wasn't going to work, and the risk of not going down, and it could have affected your family. Let's
Oh,
not,
100%.
right. And stuff like that. So truly inspirational. That is Marshall Long. And I think this is one you all should probably listen twice, because as an entrepreneur, definitely knows what he takes. And by the way, I've seen it with my own eyes, and very rarely do I leave somewhere and going, wow, that was impressive. Last time I said that was Necker Island, because I was with Richard Branson, and I left that, I'm like, wow, this guy is just, and even though I understand some of it, the other, just the thought process and discussion, and seeing you in your element of everything, and having you drive that ATV, I mean, that was another thing in Texas. And you took risk, and if you take risk out, you take opportunity out. Thank you all for listening. As we will see you on the next show. Thanks for being on.